skin. I'm Craig Cohen. Today on Houston Matters, we contemplate that and discuss the state of civil rights here in Houston and across the country.
Houston Matters with Craig Cohen is a production of Houston Public Media with support from Baylor College of Medicine.
Also this hour, it's the third Monday of the month. That's when we welcome your dog and cat care questions for Veterinarian Dr. Lori Teller. Plus, the Texans season is over. We consider what went wrong Sunday and what the Texans need to do this offseason to position themselves to try again to get over the divisional playoff hump. We'll start with a news update from NPR and News 88.7. Stay with us.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Kristen Wright. 1,500 active-duty U.S. military troops are on standby to possibly deploy to Minneapolis. They're based in Alaska and trained to operate in cold weather. It's around 7 below in Minneapolis this morning. Minnesota Public Radio's Clay Masters reports the Justice Department says it won't investigate the killing of Renee Macklin Good by a federal immigration officer in Minneapolis.
Assistant Attorney General Todd Blanche said on Fox News Sunday that the Justice Department investigates when it's appropriate to do so, but that's not the case here, he said, when an ICE agent fatally shot Macklin Good on January 7th. The DOJ blocked Minnesota from accessing evidence and witnesses, so the state has their own investigation going on.
DOJ has opened an investigation into Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey. President Trump is threatening to impose tariffs on goods imported from several NATO allies that sent small numbers of troops to Greenland. Trump continues to say the U.S. needs to acquire the territory of Denmark in the interest of national security. A spokesperson for the World Economic Forum happening in Switzerland this week says Danish officials will not attend. President Trump is expected there. Terry Schultz reports Denmark's top diplomat is visiting the country's closest allies.
Danish Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen will visit the UK and Sweden as his government continues to build support in the face of President Trump's warnings that he still intends to acquire Greenland. This is not just an issue between Denmark and the U.S., Rasmussen told journalists as he departed, adding, "This is a question of world order and the future of the NATO alliance." Denmark and the 7 NATO allies that participated in last week's mission to Greenland released a statement explaining the exercise was in the transatlantic interest. Trump called the temporary deployment a very dangerous game. It poses no threat to anyone, they countered, underscoring they're still interested in dialogue with Washington. For NPR News, I'm Terry Schultz.
The U.S. Supreme Court could decide this week whether a broad swath of President Trump's tariffs are legal. NPR's Danielle Kurtzleben has more.
The case focuses on the country-by-country tariffs Trump announced last year, saying they were retaliation against what he sees as other countries' unfair trade practices. The government's opponents in the case argue that Trump exceeded the economic powers Congress granted to him under IEPA, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. The case clearly is top of mind for Trump, and he brings it up routinely in speeches and when talking to reporters. Several justices, including conservatives, expressed skepticism at the government's arguments in the case. If the court rules against Trump, it's possible his administration would use other laws to try to replace the overturned tariffs.
You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Doris Duke Foundation, which aims to support the well-being of people and the planet for a more creative, equitable, and sustainable future. And listeners like you who donate to this NPR station.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Matt Harab. For the first time in 3 decades, Houston will have one Martin Luther King Jr. Day parade instead of 2, one hosted by the Black Heritage Society and another by the MLK Grand Parade. Those years, 2 parades had been combined in collaboration with the city of Houston. Unifying them has been a priority of Mayor John Whitmire. Today's parade will start in an hour at the intersection of Smith and Lamar Streets downtown. Organizers estimate 400,000 people will attend. Should be a cold one with a high close to just 66 today. Now, the Houston region saw cooler temperatures this weekend, reaching the 30s in some area. It was in the 30s earlier this morning. As Texas enters a cooler season, ERCOT says the state's grid is ready to meet demand this winter. Here's our Natalie Weber.
It's been nearly 5 years since Winter Storm Uri swept through the state, leaving millions of Texans without power or heat. Since then, the grid has undergone weatherization to make it more reliable. That's according to Matt Baums, the executive director for the Texas Advanced Energy Business Alliance. He says the state has also expanded its use of wind and solar power, along with battery storage.
They've been a really important addition to our grid and have kept the grid way more reliable and more affordable.
Texas's real-time grid conditions can be found at ERCOT.com. I'm Natalie Weber, News 88.7.
The Houston Texans have been eliminated from the NFL playoffs. They lost to the New England Patriots 28-16 yesterday. They end their year with 13 wins and 6 losses. Our Tom Perumian joins me live now. Tom, what happened yesterday to Houston?
Well, Matt, the sparkle in the Texans' eyes on Sunday was likely snow as injuries and mistakes led up to that 28-16 loss to a team very familiar with Super Bowls, New England.
First down at the New England 49. Play action. Stroud is picked again by Carlton Davis.
Oh, bad day for CJ. He blamed himself for the loss after the game, saying that he was sorry he let the team and the fans down. Now, the Texans had gone on a 10-game winning streak, only to suffer from injuries and losses of tight end Dalton Schultz to a calf injury. That was near the end of the first quarter. And running back Woody Marks was out briefly. Also, offensive lineman Titus Howard lost as well.
All right, again, a 13-win, 6-loss season for the Texans this year. I'm Matt Harrop, News 88.7.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen. Good morning. Thanks for joining us here on News 88.7 and on Houston Public Media's YouTube channel. Coming up this hour, your dog and cat care questions for veterinarian Dr. Lori Teller, and we will talk more about Sunday's Texans game and what went so very wrong. But first, Claudette Colvin died last week. This is a name that doesn't always show up in history books, even though she played a big part in sparking change in the middle of the last century. Colvin was only 15 when she was arrested for refusing to give up her seat on a segregated bus in 1955 in Montgomery, Alabama. This was 9 months before Rosa Parks was arrested for the same act. Their experiences sparked a year-long bus boycott in Montgomery, and that would propel the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. into the national spotlight, and then what became known as the modern civil rights movement essentially began. On this Martin Luther King Day, we naturally wonder how far we are, how far we still have to go here in Houston and across the country to reach Dr. King's vision of a society built on the content of one's character and not the color of one's skin. Let's discuss that now with three guests. Christa Stoneham, President and CEO of the Houston Land Bank. Melanie Price, Director of the Ruth J. Simmons Center for Race and Justice at Prairie View A&M University. And Ian Haddock, Founder and Executive Director of the Normal Anomaly Initiative. Good morning to you all.
Good morning. Good morning.
And as we chat, we welcome you to our conversation as well at 713-440-8870 or talk at houstonmatters.org. You can also comment, again, on our video stream on Houston Public Media's YouTube channel. I think I want to start by just asking generally how you might characterize the progress made and how far we are to go in achieving Dr. King's dream. Christa, you want to lead us off?
Yeah, we were just discussing before we went on air about affordability. Definitely when it comes to just being able to provide access and home ownership opportunities, being able to pass down that legacy. And, you know, back then they weren't even barely allowed to own property, right? And the barriers that were put in place to make sure that Black and brown families couldn't own these heirship opportunities still very much are prevalent in these same neighborhoods of just being historically disinvested. So we still got a long way to go, but I do think that we have made some progress, but there definitely is the aftermath of decades, and it's still going to take a lot more time.
Melanie Price.
Yeah, I'm thinking about all of the things that Martin Luther King would have been so proud of at the end of his life. The Voting Rights Act, the Poor People's Movement, the end of racial segregation and public accommodation. And all of those things have been, in many ways, diminished in the last few years. The Voting Rights Act has no teeth. The right of women to the autonomy of their bodies is in question. There are so many things that we thought would have been settled after the civil rights movement that have become unsettled in the last few years. And I think right now we are closer to where Martin Luther King was during the bus boycott than we were as we would think about the successes at the end of his life.
Ian Haddock, your thoughts?
That's good. That's good. I think about the fact that I am a product of that dream. I think about the fact that my mother was only 9 years old when he gave that I Have a Dream speech. And now her being dead and I am a homeowner, I am running a business, I am, stepping up for marginalized identities. I think about that and I think about how many people like me don't have that opportunity. How many people like me don't have the vision or the insight to say, hey, this is possible, right? I should not be an anomaly, right? And I think that is the work that we collectively have to do. Not just Black people, not just, I also represent queer people, but all of us have to strategically come together, because what I don't think have realized is that if you are not on the menu currently, they are preparing you in the back. And so if you are not on this civil rights movement, if you are not on, rights for marginalized identities, the reality is they coming after you. And that's what Dr. Price was just talking about. Like all of these things that came back, they're coming after everybody that's marginalized.
I think it could be easy and wrong, perhaps, to frame this as a then and now discussion, because there have been movements along the way, from desegregation to affirmative action to DEI. Across the decades, we've seen this sort of push and pull efforts towards what some characterize as equality and civil rights, and then others characterize as, no, that's going too far. I guess I'm wondering, as we've seen in particular this backlash to DEI programs over the last year, whether we're just going to always see that push and pull.
I think that's true. We will always see that push and pull. But I think that there are ways in which things in this moment, there are institutions that have been dismantled, particularly in higher ed, I think, and in corporate settings in the government. There are kinds of programs that were put in place before I was born that have been dismantled overnight, and they won't be able to be put back in place overnight. You won't be able to hire. 600,000 Black women have lost their job in the last year. That won't be corrected overnight. And so there are ways in which we are looking at, in 1 year, the complete dismantling of a civil rights infrastructure, of an intellectual project that I have spent the last 30 years working on. It is my job to study race. It is my job to study marginalized people. And essentially, I have been told that my life's work has no place in the place where I've worked my entire adult life. And so when we are in this moment, I think we should make no mistake that this isn't a simple cycling back. It means that not just me, but young people and their children will have to repair this. This will be a multi-generational fight to try to get back to where my mother, who is 82 years old, thought we were, in a settled way.
All right. Let me ask it this way. Each of these programs that we're talking about, each of these efforts, these movements, however you want to characterize it, have always been designed to level the playing field.
Right.
That's sort of the underlying premise of it all. Mm-hmm. And yet there are those who look at it and say, well, it didn't do that. Or there's an overcorrection, or that it made things, and again, we're talking about, in many cases, people who had advantages going in.
Sure.
That these various movements and programs were designed to level. What do you say in response to somebody who says, no, it didn't level the playing field, and now we need to adjust again? That's what they're saying.
Yeah, it's leveling the playing field because it works. And the thing that we always think about is that the programs that are meant to level the playing field, but the people who are against the playing field being leveled, they never stop. They never stopped trying to figure out how to undo the work of DEI programs. And so the same forces that are trying to equalize things, there are people who are against that. And when you take away the forces that are trying to equalize things, then what happens is the people who are against equality start to win. And I have been thinking a lot about King, his famous statement about how we won't remember the things that our enemies say, but we'll remember the silence of our friends. And I'm thinking about the ways in which queer people and Black people and poor people and senior citizens and immigrants, especially immigrants, are bearing the brunt of what has happened in the last year. And our friends, in many ways, have been silent.
Let's talk about that. The national dialogue over officer-involved shootings came to a head with George Floyd's murder in 2020, but of course there were many, many other high-profile examples in the years that preceded that. Today we are in the wake of protests over a different sort of police force, and ICE, and its tactics in carrying out the Trump administration's immigration crackdown. That, of course, includes the deadly shooting of Renee Good just a couple of weeks ago, again in Minneapolis, just as was the case with Floyd. Do you see parallels between police-involved shootings of Black Americans over the years and that and other incidents involving ICE officers? Is it all the same?
If you are not a white body in America, particularly closer to a white man that follows these identities, you are othered. I think one of the things that I want to bring up into this is that I think Black people, particularly Black women, have always been champions of all marginalized folk. And right now in this moment, I am hoping that, immigrants and Hispanic folk would take a look at how we have to do this together. Because when our bodies were being slain in the streets, there was a lot of silence. And there was not a lot of connection. I think they are the same. I think that some communities haven't always looked at it that way.
Christa, let's bring this back to Houston. We learned recently that Houston is among the cities with the highest number of ICE detentions, and yet we don't seem to get the sort of attention as other major cities when it comes to these issues. Is that a good or a bad thing?
It's a challenging thing, obviously. To Ian's point, just being able to not check a box of fitting in really puts us in a very challenging situation, especially with us being the most diverse city that we've always celebrated and always taken a lot of pride in. The reason I can't really speak to the reason why we haven't gotten as much attention as other major cities. Maybe it's because we're so large and vast and spread out. Maybe it's a publicity component of just where we are and where we are in our city. But I really think it's just a really challenging component.
We are talking about the state of civil rights in Houston. Go ahead.
I think it's important in a place like Houston to really think about also the face of immigration here is also Black. We have a huge African, huge Caribbean, but also a huge Afro-Latino community here, right? And so this is very much a Black issue. And if you look at other cities like Chicago, one of the things you'll see is when they raid those apartment complexes, when they go to those schools, they run warrants of everybody in the apartment complex. So any Black people living in that apartment complex, they turn you over to cooperating police. And we are cooperating in Houston.
Yes.
And so we need to understand the ways in which this is not a Spanish-speaking issue. This is not a Mexican issue. And even if it was, we should stand up for it. Mm-hmm. But it's not. It's a Nigerian issue. It's a Panamanian issue. It's a Honduran issue. And all of those people are Black.
As I said, we're talking about the state of civil rights in Houston and nationwide on this Martin Luther King Day. Coming up, more from our guests as we consider the economics, the health, representation, other indicators of equality or inequality here in Houston and across the country as Houston Matters continues on News 88.7 and YouTube.
Hi, I'm Lenny Ambrose from St. Arnold Brewing Company, proud supporters of Houston Public Media. Right now, with your $60 donation, you can choose tickets to News and Brews. This member-exclusive event takes place February 17th. Enjoy a pint, connect with fellow NPR fans, and meet the Houston Public Media Newsroom in person. Select News and Brews tickets when you donate at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate.
For Houston Public Media comes from Baylor College of Medicine. With 125 years of innovation behind it, Baylor has driven progress in health and medicine through research, education, and care that push the frontiers of modern science. Support comes from Bradshaw Carter Memorial and Funeral Services, dedicated to serving Houstonians one family at a time. All services are performed on-site, including cremation, located inside the Loop on West Alabama Street. More at bradshawcarter.com.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen. We are discussing civil rights in Houston and across the country on this Martin Luther King Jr. Day with Christa Stoneham, President and CEO of the Houston Land Bank, Dr. Melanye Price, Director of the Ruth J. Simmons Center for Race and Justice at Prairie View A&M University, and Ian Haddock, Founder and Executive Director of the Anomaly Initiative. We welcome you to our chat with your thoughts at 713-440-8870 or talk at houstonmatters.org. Christa, there are lots of ways to measure equality. There's what the law says, what opportunities exist, and then, of course, there are also outcomes for every effort to create a level playing field when it comes to jobs and wealth, health, education, other things. There are nearly always numbers that indicate a racial disparity in those results. How come?
Clarify, how come?
Why is it when we look at, let's say, we drill down too often into anything, the pandemic and who is affected by it, what home loans are given out, what business opportunities there are, varieties of categories of things, that if you drill down into the demographics of it, there always seems to be, in terms of outcomes, racial disparities, or at least not always, but too often.
Yeah, because it was designed that way, right? Speaking of just infrastructure, right? I work in real estate, right? And my background's in architecture. So when you're building a building, you have to start at the ground level first. You have to understand what goes literally in the soil. And that's the same thing with any system, regardless if it's health or education, housing. There's always intentional design and workflow of how decisions get made, who the decision makers are, and who ultimately gets impacted. And when you're looking at just the racial barriers, but also it's a class system of just making sure of who is deserving and who has access and who gets opportunity. So the fact that that was designed hundreds of years ago, which obviously is Dr. Price's life's work, and that same language may have changed over time, or the way that it looked may have changed over time, but really it's still the same aftermath of making sure that there are the consumers and the producers, and making sure that people can access dollars and people who can just continue to collect them. So it's very intentional in that way.
Dr. Price, legalized segregation technically ended in 1964, but schools in many cities, and I don't know that, Houston, I think, falls into this category, slow to integrate. Today, regardless of the law, we see some communities where public schools are arguably as segregated as ever, maybe even more. Why, and what, if anything, can be done about it?
The easiest answer to that is residential segregation. I think Crystal works in the area that explains that completely. People want to go to school near where they live, but if you live in communities that are racially segregated, then you're going to end up with schools that are racially segregated. And I'm saying this as a person who took a bus from 6th to 12th grade across, across the city of Houston to go to school. And we cannot figure out in this country how to maintain integrated neighborhoods without doing a ton of work. People are not willing to live next door to people who are different from them. And if we know that, then what we have to do is be intentional about how we spread kids across schools in the city. And we have become more reluctant to put kids on buses to figure out how we're going to get them to interact with each other.
Ian, in recent years here in Texas, some school boards have removed books from libraries. A new state law mandates school restrooms, among other state-run buildings, be designated for use according to biological sex. Do you see parallels between those efforts that are focused largely on LGBTQ plus students and race-related battles of the past, or do you see it as something different?
Absolutely. I mean, we work at the intersection of Black and LGBT, and we are seeing these things not only play out in a cyclical way, but we're seeing the effects. You know, there are studies that say 34% of Black trans women make under $10,000 a year, right? We're seeing that 1 in 2 Black gay men can contract HIV in their lifetime, right? And so it's the intersection of the Blackness and the queerness that actually makes the disparities more prominent. And I think that that's the intersectional lens we have to look at everything as. And I think the general community is missing that point, that it's all interconnected.
Another possible way to measure how far we have to go to achieve Dr. King's dream has to do with representation in government. There are now 5 Black members of the U.S. Senate, but Texas has never elected one. There have only been 14 in 250 years of U.S. history. There are other similar disparities among women, among Hispanics, other examples of representation that doesn't quite match the country's demographics. Does representation, roughly matching the demographic makeup of any population, does that actually demonstrate equality, or do you see that as more box checking more than anything else? Throw it out to all of you.
Yeah, I mean, I can just speak on my own personal experience. So when I became CEO about 4 years ago, I believe I was the 5th Black woman in the country, not knowing that I'm leading the largest land bank as well and the youngest land bank leader, period, regardless of color. And as I've continued to grow in my career, both locally and nationally, and still sometimes still face some of the flat out discrimination, because people may not understand how I got in this role. People may question my professionalism because of how I show up, whether with my jewelry or, you know, me just speaking unapologetically about, we focus on what people like to say underserved neighborhoods, which we know really underlying are the Black and brown ones. But I like to call them communities of opportunity, because at one time they were thriving, right? And then with desegregation and also just disinvestment, the freeways that were dividing them up, right? Being able to educate people about what I'm doing and not just why I'm here and just looking at my face as clearly a Black woman. So I think representation is not just it's a combination, right? Yes, I'm somewhat checking this box, but I'm also making sure that I'm sharing my mindset and I'm being able to have succession planning, because I'm not going to be in this seat forever. And I want to be sure that I'm opening up more doors and more pathways and helping to inspire somebody, because I wasn't even able to meet anybody with my education until just maybe 6 years ago, right? I've never seen another Black woman that was both an architect and a planner and a policymaker until I started working with the mayor's office.
So it's not just being there, it's what you do with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think representation, that one way to look at it is look at the face of something. But it's also important to think that representation matters because the composition of the room changes the conversation. There's plenty of evidence that shows that the more women you have in state legislatures, the more money that is spent on education, on healthcare, on issues related to children. The same is true, the more Black people, the more Latinos you have, the more time, the more concern is spent on issues related to equity. And so what we need to understand is it's not about having a face in the place, it's about shaping conversations, because it's also true that the people who are not marginalized, who are not minorities in that room, moderate themselves as well. They think more about equity. They think more about women. They think more about those things when women and when people of color, when queer people are in the room, right? It's not just about being the face of something.
Ian?
Yeah, I would say that representation is important, but oftentimes I think it's missed that often the people that represent these communities that look like them are the best people to do it, right? Like, that's also an important piece to the conversation. Like, it's not just that it's equality because they look like them. No, they are the best people. They have the best background. They did the most work to get there. And oftentimes it feels like a box check, but no, like, you've actually done the work to be there. And I think that that is also an important part of the question.
I am old enough now to have lived through and experienced busing, affirmative action, Black Lives Matter, DEI, a variety of other efforts and movements. What's the next one? I know there's a little bit of a peering into a crystal ball kind of thing, but maybe you're getting a sense of where is that next most pressing need for activism that may not be immediately apparent?
I mean, I'm going to say for me, it's education. Students are getting an educational curriculum now that looks like the 1950s. Right? It is the disappearance of 50 years of Latino studies, 50 years of African American studies, over 50 years of women's studies. And people think that these things came into place because people of color, I guess, and women like to complain. It's because they weren't being talked about in French. They weren't being talked about in English. They weren't being talked about in political science. And so if they're not talked about in those places and you disappear these programs, then how are people supposed to learn about the contributions of other people? How are children supposed to learn? How are Black and brown children, which are the majority of the Houston Independent School District, how are they supposed to learn about representation of themselves?
That raises another question that I wanted to get to before we wrap up, which is how we celebrate Martin Luther King Day.
Yeah.
By taking off school.
Yeah.
And taking off work and having mattress sales.
Well, everything's going to be a sale in our world.
Well, okay.
Here's the thing I'd like to say about that. Martin Luther King never took an African American studies class, and he changed the world. Yeah. And so the thing that I will leave you on this hopeful note for me is that I am not worried about these children being able to change the world without learning this history, because it turns out that our foreparents who picked cotton, who never went to school, they still changed. They still found the civil rights movement. They still led the Harlem Renaissance. They still did all of these things without an African American studies program. But how sad is it that they worked hard, that they fought, that they suffered and sacrificed so that these things, so our children could learn it easier, so they wouldn't have to learn it at church on the weekends and in civic groups on, in the afternoons after school, so these kids could get this in their classroom. How sad is it now that we are going back to having to tell the local public libraries and churches, start teaching Black history in your courses, start teaching Latino history in your churches, because your kids are not going to get it at school.
That said, do we do Martin Luther King Day wrong?
I don't think we give it as much justice as we could. Personally, how I celebrate and how I choose to show up every day is just to inspire hope. I feel like I've heard that at least 10 different times from our mouths. And being able to control the land is being able to help influence the future. So I seek to just help to continue to see people what's possible with the outcomes and physical, tangible products that we help to produce at the Land Bank, and as I continue to show up in spaces and other change makers that are here with us today.
Yeah.
Christa Stoneham is the president and CEO of the Houston Land Bank. Dr. Melanie Price is director of the Ruth J. Simmons Center for Race and Justice at Prairie View A&M. Ian Haddock is the founder and executive director of the Normal Anomaly Initiative. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just ahead, as I said, it's the third Monday of the month. That's when we welcome your dog and cat care questions for veterinarian Dr. Lori Teller. You can send those now to talk@houstonmatters.org or call 713-440-8870. And stay with us as Houston Matters continues on News 88.7 and on YouTube.
You count on Houston Public Media. That's why you're here right now. Take the next step and become a new member today. Every gift makes a difference. And with a gift of $5 a month or more, you'll receive PBS Passport, a member benefit that lets you stream more of the shows you love anytime. It only takes a minute to make a big difference. Join as a new member today at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 800-364-8300.
And I'm Guy Raz from How I Built This.
Between inflation and worker shortages, it's important to understand the economy right now.
That's right, and find out how entrepreneurs make it work for them.
Listen to Planet Money and How I Built This from NPR for an hour of economics
and innovation
every week.
Planet Money and How I Built This, Saturdays at 9 a.m. on News 88.7.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen.
Black and orange stray cat sitting on a fence. You ain't nothing but a hound dog.
How much is that dog in the window?
and cats living together, mass hysteria.
Once again, Houston Matters goes to the dogs and cats as we welcome your questions about the care and feeding of your canine and feline friends for veterinarian Dr. Lori Teller from the Meyerland Animal Clinic and Texas A&M University. Lori, welcome.
Glad to be here.
And we welcome any questions you have about the dog or cat companion in your life. You can call or text 713-440-8870 or email talk@houstonmatters.org to field or to have your question answered by Dr. Teller. And as we await those questions, let's talk a little bit about life with a new pet in the home. This is something many Houstonians may be settling into after the holidays. If you don't mind, can we start with cats?
Sure.
What are some of the early challenges of acclimating a new kitten into your home?
Well, some of the biggest, probably the number one thing that we hear about when we have our new kitten visits is training them to use a scratching post versus the sofa or
Right.
other furniture.
So a scratching post is a must-have for anybody that has a new kitten.
Absolutely. And I'd suggest having multiple. So whatever the main rooms are that you are going to be hanging out with your new kitten, have a scratching post in that room. Put it next to the sofa, next to your bed, wherever they
How do
may
you
be.
get them to scratch on that and not on the sofa or the bed?
So you have to make it very appealing. Put treats on it. There's all sorts of little cat treats, Temptations and Greenies and things that you can put on and around the scratching post to entice the cat to come to it.
If you put your fingers on it and scratch it, will the cat pick that up?
You can try, or when your cat starts scratching on the sofa or other unwanted furniture, moving the cat to nicely moving the cat to the scratching post and kind of gently helping it rub its paws on it. But making it very attractive. If your cat likes the smell of tuna, maybe smearing a little tuna juice or something on the scratching post.
All right. How about for a puppy?
Puppies are a lot. And so house training is, of course, the number one thing that we start helping clients with when they get a new puppy. So helping them understand that you really need to go outside very frequently after they eat, after a playtime, after they've awakened from a nap or first thing in the morning. But getting them to go outside with them. Don't just push them out the back door. And even develop a command, go potty, whatever seems to work for you. And when they do what they're supposed to do outside, rewarding that behavior. Much of what we do when we're training puppies and kittens is positive reinforcement of what we want them to do, and trying to limit negative behaviors. If your puppy has an accident in the house, don't go yell at it. Don't roll up a newspaper and bop it on the nose.
That raises another important point. Is this training as much for the people in the home as it is for the dog or cat?
Yes. And much like we talk about with new babies, structure is super important. Puppies do really well with a schedule. So knowing they're going to get up at a certain time in the morning, go outside, get breakfast, things like that. And puppies have what's called a gastrocolic reflex. So typically once you feed a young puppy, they're going to need to have a bowel movement fairly quickly after that. So know you need to be prepared to take your puppy outside.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen. On the third Monday of the month, we welcome your dog and cat care questions for veterinarian Dr. Lori Teller, and there is still time for you to call or text 713-440-8870. You can email talk@houstonmatters.org or comment on our video stream at houstonpublicmedia.org and on Houston Public Media's YouTube channel. Ready to dive into those questions?
Let's do it.
All right. Jessica's in the Heights. Jessica, what's your question or comment for Dr. Teller?
Yeah, hi, doctor. So I actually have a dog. She's almost 13 years old. I've had her whole life. We recently moved into a new apartment a little over 2 months ago, and since moving into the apartment, she has been peeing on the floor every single day. She's been house trained since she was a puppy. Nothing has changed other than her environment. I have checked. She doesn't have a UTI or anything like that, but anytime I leave, she goes and pees in 2 spots of the apartment. I've tried using pee pads, which she's never used her whole life, so she doesn't know what it is. And I tried crating her and kind of starting over the process of training her again, but she would use it in the crate as well. So she would sit in it during the day. So at this point, I'm kind of at a point where I don't know what to do.
Is she only doing it when you're leaving the house, or does it even happen when you're at home?
No, it's only when I'm gone. And it doesn't matter how long I'm gone, she will do it.
So I would talk to your veterinarian, especially since you've ruled out medical causes like a urinary tract infection. It could definitely be something related to separation anxiety, especially since it's associated with your departure, and moving to a new location may have mentally triggered something in her where she's just worried you're not going to come back. So I would definitely discuss with your veterinarian about separation anxiety. I would also discuss some cognitive dysfunction changes. Since she is 13 years old, one of the big signs that we'll see as dogs start some early changes in their cognitive abilities is also changes in their house training, and they'll start urinating in the house. And there are things that can be done for both of those issues. So I think that's certainly a conversation to have with your veterinarian.
Could playing music or the radio or TV or something, some sound, noise in the house that the dog is used to when you are there, leaving that on, could that help?
It can. It can help with some dogs that have separation anxiety, especially if there's other noises in the environment that may trigger the problem. But usually that's part of a bigger behavioral modification plan, and in some cases medication as well. I
am aware of a greyhound in Chicago that listens to Houston Matters every day.
That's awesome.
So there is a possibility.
There is. Maybe that's what we need to be doing, is playing Houston Matters.
There you go. Thanks very much for that call. Gretchen's in Richmond. Gretchen, what's your question for Dr. Teller?
Hi, thank you for taking my call. I might have a similar question. My mother has a 10-year-old dachshund who has started peeing on her couch at night after everyone goes to sleep in the house. And so my mom's in the house. He's gone out to use potty before bed. So now she put a little diaper on the poor guy. So I'm wondering, could that be cognitive as well?
It could.
They check for UTI.
Yeah. If they've ruled out a UTI, and since it's a male dog, also checking for prostate issues, definitely cognitive issues could be a part of this. Incontinence can also develop in some of our older pets, and even though they've gone outside before bedtime, sometimes they can't hold it all night long. And so there can be some incontinence issues as well, and we'll see this in locations where the dogs like to sleep. And so that may be something else to talk to your mom's veterinarian about ruling out as well.
Okay, because I'm used to, I foster dogs. I'm used to, having just older females, but I've never seen it in a male dog. So this is kind of new for all of us.
Yeah, it's less common in male dogs, but it does certainly happen.
All right, thanks very much for that call. Let's go next to Sharon in Chimney Rock. Sharon, what's your question?
Thank you for taking my call. I have a 6-year-old mixed dog who had allergies starting as a puppy, and they found that he was allergic to just about everything. He's been on shots to help that for going on 3 years. Is there a point in time when you retest them to see that the allergens that he's being given are the ones he's allergic to still, or do you just continue?
That's a great question. So allergies can certainly change. We live in Houston, so it's amazing when we find dogs that aren't allergic to something. They can certainly develop new allergies to things as well. It would be pretty rare for us to completely wean a dog off of the allergy shots they're getting, though we can get them down to a really low dose or a longer period of time in between. But if your dog is developing new symptoms, if the allergy shots don't seem to be helping anymore, things like that, then it would certainly be worth talking to your veterinarian about reevaluating to see if there's other allergies that have developed. But it would be pretty uncommon to have the allergies just completely disappear.
All right. Thanks very much for that call. We appreciate it. We have an email from MV who asks, what do you do when a dog eats grass?
Dogs eat grass really commonly, and I've had some dogs that I've actually thought were cows dressed as dogs because they would just go outside in the backyard and just nibble away for the day. So a lot depends on what else is going on. Certainly, you want to rule out a medical condition. Is there a GI problem going on? Does your dog have potential intestinal parasites that are triggering this? Something metabolic, liver disease, kidney disease, because some dogs will eat grass to alleviate nausea. Double check and make sure the food the dog is eating is nutritionally complete for the dog's needs, because sometimes they may be searching for a nutrient that's missing. Some dogs just like grass, just the way that some people really want to eat a salad and crave a salad. And that's what ended up being with my dogs that were part cow, after ruling out all the other issues. But if they're eating and coming in and throwing up, if they are not interested in their regular food, if you're noticing other signs, then certainly checking for an underlying medical condition would be where I would start. And if they are deemed perfectly healthy, then you want to make sure that your grass is as safe as possible, avoiding herbicides and pesticides and things that are out there in the grass, making sure that your dog is on an intestinal parasite preventive, because certainly other animals are roaming through your yard and can spread parasites that way as well.
Dogs are led so much by their noses that anything they smell in the grass, their inclination is just going to be, that must be food.
Yes. Sometimes they may be going after rodent poop or things like that, as disgusting as that sounds, but dogs are not the most discriminate eaters.
It always brings me joy when we can wrap up our conversation on rodent poop. Well done. Dr. Teller is a veterinarian with the Meyerland Animal Clinic and teaches veterinary medicine at Texas A&M University. Dr. Lori Teller, thank you very much.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
And still to come, why the Texans just can't seem to get over the divisional playoff hump. Stay with us as Houston Matters continues on News 88.7 and YouTube.
Hi. It's not just your car. It's the one that brought your kids home from school, took you cross-country, held memories, laughter, even a few breakdowns. When it's time to let go, give your car a new purpose. Donate it and turn memories into meaningful support for this station. Plus, you'll enjoy free and easy pickup, potential tax benefits, and a simple donation process. Your gift supports the programs you and your family love. Donate today and help keep public media strong. Call or donate online.
This American Life, we like stories that surprise you. For instance, imagine finding a new hobby and realizing
to do this hobby right, according to the ways of the masters, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to have to bend the law to get the materials that you need.
If not break it.
Yeah, to break international laws.
Real life stories, really good ones, every week.
Saturdays at 11 a.m. and Wednesdays at 9 p.m. on News 88.7.
The Houston Texans season came to an inauspicious end on Sunday in a turnover-riddled, snowy afternoon in Foxborough. The Texans lost 28-16, but it never really felt that close. Quarterback C.J. Stroud threw 4 interceptions, was sacked 3 times, threw just 1 touchdown pass, and completed just 20 of 47 passing attempts in a performance that was somehow worse than last week's 5-fumble display. So now for the 3rd straight season, Texans reach and lose in the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. Let's talk about it now with Houston Press writer Jeff Balke. Hi, Jeff.
Good morning, Craig.
There were a lot of things working against Stroud on Sunday. The weather, an injury-depleted offense, pressure from the Patriots, poorly timed penalties and drops. Maybe he's not totally healthy, but mostly he was just bad. Right?
Yeah, I was going to say you can add his decision-making to that list. Yeah. I mean, it was just a terrible performance from him. I think the thing that's been really surprising with CJ is how dramatically his fortunes have changed since he came into the league. I mean, his passer rating, like his first playoffs was like 102. The next year it was like in the 90s. This year it was 55. It's just his decision making. He came into the NFL as someone who was a good quality decision maker, didn't tend to turn the ball over. I mean, I forget how many straight passes he threw without an interception.
That's what we all loved about him as a rookie. We're like, wow, this guy he's playing like a seasoned veteran in his rookie year, and now he's playing like a rookie.
Yeah, there was something he said in his post-game interview where he said that he was trying to make plays, and the truth is that, and maybe this is a quarterback mentality for guys who are, do have talent like he does, but you don't have to make plays with this defense. It's not necessary. The only thing you really have to do is not turn the ball over. I mean, that is the main thing you have to do, is protect the football. If you do that, chances are you're going to win more times than you lose. And we've seen that. We saw that from the Texans when Davis Mills took over. He made a few plays here and there, but for the most part, his goal was just don't turn the ball over. He didn't do that, and the team won.
Were you at any moment thinking to yourself, maybe they should bring Davis Mills into this game?
So I got a couple of text messages from friends of mine, like at the half, saying, do you replace C.J. Stroud? And my thought was maybe. Not because you think Davis Mills will be better, like suddenly he'll be making plays that CJ can't make, but because maybe he just won't make the mistakes that CJ made. Now, credit where it's due. I mean, he came in and he did not make the mistakes of the first half in the second half. I don't know how you could have been worse than you were in that first half of football, but he did come in and play all right in the second half. And to his credit, Coach DeMeco Ryan said, he's our guy. He's he's loyal, and that may pay dividends later. And maybe in the offseason they just need to spend some time working on it. They certainly need to work on their offense. But this was an awful performance. They would have won if CJ had just kept from turning the ball over.
Can the Texans win in the future with Stroud as quarterback?
Well, that all depends on what happens in this offseason and going into next year. I mean, he's coming up for an extension. I don't think the Texans are going to not extend him. I think they will. I think they still believe in his talent. I think they still believe in his general abilities. But they've got to change some of that mentality. You can't you can't be a gunslinger on a team that doesn't require a gunslinger, right? The other thing too is let's be honest. They have really they've spent a lot of time the last 2 years building this defense. It's one of the historically best defenses in the NFL. Most of these players will be back next year. There's very, very few guys who are unrestricted free agents on the defensive side of the football. So they should be really good. That means they can spend the entire offseason, I would hope, focusing specifically on improving the offense. That means improving the run game. That means improving the offensive line. That means adding additional weapons for C.J. Stroud to throw to.
It seemed like they had found a combination on their offensive line up until injuries in this last week that worked pretty well for a series of weeks. On the other hand, it was just one combination.
Right.
Is that really the key here, that you need to have a couple more quality options on the O-line that, regardless of injuries that will inevitably occur, that your front five is still a solid front five without a glaring weakness somewhere? Yeah,
depth is going to be critical. Obviously, the Texans have all sorts of depth on their defensive line, and it showed. They had numerous injuries along their defensive line throughout the season, but they just plugged new guys in, and boom, they were in there. Offensive lines are unique. This morning I was listening to the Texans Post morning show, and I was listening to Andre Ware, and he was talking about how the offensive line is one of the most difficult things to really gel. And in fact, a lot of offensive lines, they spend their time together off the field as well. They need 5 guys who are going to be together and playing well. But to your point, they also need players that can come in and can spell these guys, number one, and number two, who can operate in the instance when there are deficiencies because of injury. I mean, you can't just go through a season and expect you're not going to get injured. Football is a war of attrition. And this is a team that has to get better along that offensive line. I think it's got to be their number one, maybe number two priority this year.
I've always thought of offensive lines the same way I think of pitching rotations in baseball. Somebody is always injured and somebody's always slumping. So you got to have 7 at least.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. And I think also what you have to have is – you have to have – look, even when they were playing with good guys, they were still having pre-snap penalties. They were still making mental mistakes. This is a team that should not be mentally weak. This is a team that, with their coaching staff and the skill sets of the players that they have, these are guys that should be coming in. They talk about the Patriot way. Like, this has been their talk ever since they brought Nick Caserio in. But one of the things about the Patriot way is the Patriots didn't mess up. They got up to the line of scrimmage quick. They didn't have huge pre-snap penalties. They were exploiting other teams' defensive weaknesses because they were smarter, because they were quicker to react. That's something the Texans really have to focus on the offense this offseason.
I kind of sense that maybe the tight end position was a little exposed yesterday, that once Dalton Schultz went down with an injury, Cade Stover came in, and there were plays where he was, now granted, the throws were not great, again, from Stroud, but he was wide open and unable to pull the ball down. Yeah, I think Cade Stover is just a decent blocking, tight end. I do think that is one skill position where the Texans definitely need to address in the offseason. They need more depth. In the tight end position. Honestly, look, they're going to need depth in the wide receiver position. I think they've got good wide receivers, but when they're injured, there's a huge drop-off. I guess the question there is, who can they count on at wide receiver in terms of health? Well, I think, Higgins and Knoll played basically the entire season. Nico Collins, he had concussion problems. That was his biggest issue. Christian Kirk's a free agent, so, whether they re-sign him or not, we'll see. I'm not sure of Xavier Hutchinson's status. He proved to be a really solid possession receiver. Should we ever expect Tank Dell? Yeah, Tank Dell, for all that's what I was going to say, he should be back. I think he's been out and basically been okay. They're not going to bring him in and play him, but he should be back for the start of next season. And then you have to start looking at other possibilities down the line. Look, if Knoll is not going to be a regular receiver, if he's mainly going to be a return guy, which is fine, that means you definitely need another wide receiver. And so I think they're going to have to make some moves for that. One last big picture question. This is not just 3 years in a row that the Texans have been unable to get over the playoff hump and beyond the second round. They've never been able to do it. Well, why? There hasn't been a team in Houston that's done it since 1979, since the Houston Oilers did it. And why the Texans haven't been able – look, there are a litany of answers for that question. There have been coaching problems. There have been quarterback problems. There have been defense and offensive issues. Sometimes these things, it's not one specific thing. Now, I will say my personal opinion always was that the Texans were not a very well-managed team top to bottom when it was their original ownership with Bob McNair and Hannah McNair. No offense to any of them. I just don't think it was managed well top down. I think they tried to run it like a traditional business. I don't think it was done that way. I think Cal McNair has been better about that. He's allowed the football side to do what they need to do. He's brought in guys who are willing to – look, for a while they didn't want to sign anybody who wasn't like a good guy who didn't have any kind of blemishes in his track record, had to be perfect. I think they've made some decisions that they're like, look, for football we have to make decisions that aren't necessarily always going to be the perfect ones, but we have to take swings when we can. And I do think they've done that over the last, say, 5 years. Jeff Balke writes for the Houston Press and co-hosts the Believe in Astros podcast. Jeff, thank you. Thank you, Craig. And that will do it for today's show. The Houston Matters team includes Michael Haggerty, Joshua Zinn, Brenda Valdivia, Mincho Jacob, and Laura Walker. Tom Carter was our technical director today. I'm Craig Cohen. Join us tomorrow for more Houston Matters.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Baylor College of Medicine. With 125